Hello, welcome to Sport Unlocked with me, Rob Harris from Sky News, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times. Now, Martyn, you and myself were at the IFAB meeting this week. It sounds pretty dull, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't the most glamorous location, was it? It was a hotel at Heathrow Airport, Terminal 5, and we were sort of squeezed into a boardroom. But actually, it was a really interesting meeting for those of us who are interested in the sort of technical things of how football is run in terms of the laws of the game.
And it is one of those things that just a few of us in some nondescript place, but with an impact all around the world on just what happens to the laws of football and at every single level. And Tariq, you were there firsthand actually at the stadium this week to see all the controversy over ultimately what happens to things like VAR. So where was your glamorous trip to?
So the other end of your meeting, actually, I was at Parc des Princes on Tuesday night, Champions League game, and yet more VAR controversy. But again, one of the things that we discuss here, also quite a lot of geopolitics. And you see that image there of Alexander Shefrin, the UEFA president, sat in the middle. On the left, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, Qatar's representative to football in a way, PSG president. On the right, Yasser Al-Rumayyan, Saudi Arabia's representative, the chairman of Newcastle, but also of the Public Investment Fund and Aramco. Martyn, last week you broke the news that Aramco are going to be a FIFA sponsor.
Yeah, that's two fairly influential people from the Middle East that Sheffield was sitting between. So, I think that illustrates how football has changed remarkably.
And at our end of that trip, we were at Heathrow just this week. The Public Investment Fund's buying a 10% stake in Heathrow Airport, with Qatar already owning, 20-odd% of them.
Yeah, it feels like the moment, if it's not nailed down, it's Saudi investments on its way. Actually, even if it is nailed down, Saudi Arabian investments there is. It feels like that period 10 years ago when Qatar and the UAE were those big investors, whether it's big shiny buildings in London, other baubles, football clubs. This feels like the Saudi time.
Yeah, it does. And we're sitting in Knightsbridge recording this at the moment. The heart of a lot of that investment.
Yeah, we might all be working for them soon, because there's, when I say them, not the Saudis, but Sheikh Mansour is in talks over buying the Daily Telegraph newspaper. Sheikh Mansour, the owner of Manchester City. So, it's Gulf investments, media, football, sport, business. It's all one.
It's interesting, the Telegraph story, isn't it? I mean, subject to probably a review from the UK government. But if it was to happen, it would be interesting, given some of the topics we talk about just on our side within sports. We've got, this never-ending Manchester City case, for example. The Premier League is still running now. If the owner of your newspaper is also the owner of that football team, how do you cover that?
Well, yeah, that will be a challenge. But Tariq, you've often been wrongly accused, haven't you, of having club influence on the New York Times ownership in the past? On covering Liverpool?
Yeah, that's right. You get the odd comment, etc. on I think FSG or John Henry being an investor in the New York Times, which is not true at all. And yeah, I guess if this thing is true, then it's something that, if you're the reporter, Martyn, you're the reporter, would you be worried about your owner and his team covering what's happening?
Yeah, I think you'd want some pretty good, strong assurances that you are free to cover things and all the issues without any sort of interference. That's absolutely for sure. And am I right in thinking also that the Liverpool ultimate owners may also be involved in the Telegraph deal too? So obviously there are issues with them too.
Not just them, they're actually the AC Milan owners. Jerry Cardinale of Redbird has got this joint venture with Sheikh Mansour's company. And speaking of just sudden interruptions as well, sometimes in sport, welcome Charlie Sale.
Former Daily Mail columnist, sports agenda columnist, just entered where we happen to be at the moment. And, who better to perhaps reflect on one of the sad stories of the week, the death of Terry Venables at the age of 80. You must have encountered him many times as part of the media pack at a time when it was even more ferocious than it is now.
Terry had fantastic press, hasn't he, after his sad demise, but because he got on really well with journalists, but not many of them actually on those weeks after the Panorama investigations, got behind him. They saw something all went suddenly. All their great mates with Terry all went missing.
So what was it all about then, the case? So many people will be listening from around the world who won't know. What did it all involve? What was it like covering a former player, former manager, became a chief exec, England manager, then embroiled in court and allegations?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically Terry tried to buy Tottenham with other people's money. And Alan Sugar found this out and wanted Terry employed an ex-bankrupted Eddie Ashby as his sort of general manager. So it all went sort of very downhill. But I mean, the thing about Terry is a brilliant bloke, fantastic football coach. But as a businessman, he was big in football, a bit like Alex Ferguson when he took on the Irish. They're very big in their own pond, but even like Gary Neville, although he thinks he's now on Dragon's Den or something. But I mean, Terry, that's when it went wrong for Terry, when he sort of challenged Sugar. I thought he had the sort of intellect and sort of business acumen to challenge Sugar, which was ridiculous. In football, he was the king, like Ferguson was the king in football. When they go out of their comfort zones or their area of expertise, that's where it goes wrong.
It's a bit of a shame for English football, actually, because he was forced out of the job effectively because the FA came under pressure, didn't they, about his business affairs.
Massive disappointment. Terry said he didn't do auditions, was his famous quote, because he was asked to sort of go for an interview, Euro 96 or just before. It was all happening there. There's court cases pending.
And how was it for you then at that time reporting? I mean, it was almost like not quite the birth of sports news, but the growth of sports news throughout the 1990s, and Venables being at the heart of it. You were in the England pack around Euro 96, trying to follow a home tournament with, I suppose, football front and back page news for negative and positive reasons.
Well, the difference between then and now is that it was just the newspapers, wasn't it? There wasn't like the mass media, which you have to deal with now, podcasts like this, whatever, online. It was just the newspapers, and it was ferocious. You can remember the time the Sun and the Mirror, which unfortunately are pretty tame shadows of what they were, were absolutely fantastic papers in those days, and sort of led the agenda.
Yeah, some great reflections there, remembering Terry Venables. Another sad death this week at the age of 100, the former US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. So much controversy around his life. But as we look at the sporting aspects, of course, we encountered him around the world of FIFA, didn't we? Yeah, 2011 in that Blatter era. Martyn, what happened?
Kissinger was a football fan. He'd actually been involved in the 1994 World Cup, in American soccer organisations more widely, and he'd become friendly with Blatter. And in one of the various FIFA scandals, 2011, Blatter announced that he was inviting Kissinger and Placido Domingo to be members of what he called a council of wisdom. We're going to sort everything out, and that he said Kissinger was happy about joining, but the council of wisdom clearly thought it was wiser never to meet.
Yeah, it didn't actually take place, but he Kissinger, big football fan anyway, wasn't he, from his younger days before he arrived in the United States. Never lost that love for football. I think he was involved in the USA 94 World Cup, was certainly a prominent figure. He attended, almost like Gianni in Qatar, as many games as possible, and for a while was America's biggest, most significant football supporter in that country. And now 3 years before they host the World Cup, 100 and out for Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger, I think we should also remember, was not everybody's cup of tea. Some people viewed him as a war criminal for the carpet bombing of Cambodia, and but he was someone that Sepp Blatter had a great liking for, because I think he got what Sepp Blatter always wanted, the Nobel Peace Prize.
Must have been like, look, I've been trying to get one for years, Henry. What do you do? So, speaking of Nobel, I guess that's where the great handshake for peace effort, say great, I mean the bizarre handshake for peace effort that Blatter instituted must have come from. But yeah, the end of Henry Kissinger.
Well, no Gianni Infantino here in London this week. Some other FIFA delegates were here for the International Football Association board meeting. Bit of a shift in tone, but Martyn, you and I were both there at the IFAB meeting. Just trying to avoid getting into the weeds of VAR, but it really was interesting. This group all men deciding the laws of the game, and a particular sort of focus on where VAR goes next. And these moves to try and expand it, it does give the impression that we are just creating an expanded, bloated refereeing industry, while of course the abuse of referees is pretty shocking. And Pierluigi Collina, the FIFA refereeing head, when I asked him about it, said it could be the cancer that kills football. But we seem to be just making football as a sport more complicated.
Yeah, the IFAB, the International FA Board, for people who don't know, is a sort of strange historic organisation made up of the 4 British associations and FIFA. And they decide on the laws of the game, so all the VAR stuff. Collina, he stole that quote from Noel Mooney, the chief executive of Football Association of Wales, who actually said it in the meeting. And then Collina thought, "Well, that's good. I'll say it myself." But he did give the credit to Noel Mooney. But there are some significant things. One is sin bins in professional football. The trials of that is coming, not just for dissent, which we talked about before, but also for tactical fouls. If it's a blatant foul when no attempt to play the ball just to stop the play. But I do feel that's opening up another Pandora's box for VAR and subjective decisions.
Yeah, the thing is, we've seen last couple of years, it's this constant delay and second refereeing with the TV. When this idea of VAR first came up, there was going to be minimal disruption, they were suggesting, weren't they? It would be used infrequently, wouldn't be multiple times a game. It could be 3 or 4 games before VAR would be needed, and it wouldn't take interminable number of minutes. It would be over in seconds. Martyn, that hasn't been the case, has it?
No, that was that was how FIFA and IFAB said it was going to be, but it's gone completely the other way, and they are going to look at whether they should extend its use still further. Corners, free kicks. Should the VAR be able to intervene and tell the referee, no, that wasn't a corner? Or is that going to lead to more delays? That is the fear.
Yeah, and we just look at the whole situation with things like offside. Well, of course, many other parts of the debate and the ins and out of VAR, that it just seems incredible. We're watching officials forensically analysing an offside when all it started was to stop goal hanging effectively. And now we're sort of trying to judge, is there a slight advantage? But when I was trying to illustrate this to one of the members of IFAB on the sides of the meeting in the corridors, and I thought, they're just so precise. They're like, well, you have to have precision. How can you have interpretation? But I think you could have a situation where just leave it to the assistant referee and the referee. If you can see the offside, you can then give it. If not, no point analysing it, because there's not some huge advantage trying to be gained.
Yeah, I think they've made a rod for this idea of this language, clear and obvious, is causing all sorts of issues, in my opinion, because now when you slow something down and you watch it on video, then it does maybe become clear and obvious. But it's not clear and obvious in the sense of a fast-flowing football match where it's so blatant that an error has been made. It needs to be changed. Don't you think? Now we're looking at micromillimeters, and suddenly that becomes clear and obvious in multiple replays.
Yeah, I think that's been the whole problem with it. There were some also interesting technological developments. One is this semi-automated offside technology, which is going to be used at the Club World Cup in Saudi Arabia next month, where they will send an immediate message to the linesman if a player is 50 centimetres or more offside. So he will be able to, if he's got in any sort of doubt, he can lift his flag up straight away.
Yeah, and also sin bins discussed. It felt sort of slightly strange, the fact we're sitting in this boardroom and it's going to have a consequence, these sin bins, if they are introduced to millions and millions of people all around the world. And yet it's just this, largely, apart from Collina, group of non-football specific officials who've come from commercial or marketing or accountancy backgrounds who are sort of having this big say.
Yeah, it's that kind of funny way football has developed historically, isn't it? The suits in the boardrooms decide what happens on the field, but these are just trials, aren't they? And they'll if it works, they'll institute it. But I feel a bit of an outsider on this, because a few weeks ago I was praising the idea of sin bins, having watched the Rugby World Cup, because a red card in the 11th minute for something not particularly egregious ruins the game and the spectacle. If you can have a 10-minute cool down and that advantage is minimal, that might be a better option.
Just as I said, there are 2 people in the FA board who are former professional players, Ian Maxwell and Noel Mooney, so we should probably just mention that.
A good clarification there. It's a good job we sent my comments for review, and now we have the actual final verdict. So it's always interesting to go to an IFAB meeting because we do actually get close contact to be able to talk through these things in depth. And ultimately, often it can seem quite technical, but this is one of those weeks where it becomes front and back page news, particularly in England. And ultimately, people need to know about these things. But Tariq, on to your trip to Paris, and so much going on with the Olympic build-up this week. In particular, the IOC meetings there, deciding the next host after Milan and Cortina in 2026 for the 2030 and 2034 games. So Salt Lake City for 2034. We can get into some reflections on the last time it was in Salt Lake City, and France for the Alps for 2030. I seem to remember Arsene Wenger being involved in a bid for Annecy in the past.
I think that was withdrawn. I don't think it even went to a vote, but nothing goes to vote anymore. Yeah, they've decided these are going to be. But more interestingly, I thought, but for many people, about the Paris Olympics and the transport links, and the security, they're going to double the price of metros.
And on Salt Lake City for 2034, you think that'd be the last place they'd want to go back to? You must have covered that IOC scandal at the time. What exactly happened? And seem to move on from it.
Yeah, that was when the sort of roof fell in on the IOC. It was revealed that there'd been Salt Lake City and Atlanta before that, 1996, had basically been bribing IOC members left, right and centre. And not just cash, but they were giving scholarships to the children of IOC members, all sorts of like ridiculously indulgent gifts. So that led to a big sort of, clean up, a big change really. And yes, now going back to the place where it all came crashing down.
Yeah, and you got to think that, did they learn their lessons from what happened in Salt Lake City, Martyn? You said that, yeah, they got rid of some people, a big scandal. However, you look at the Rio Olympics in 2016, massive scandal around that. Carlos Nuzman, the IOC member, big cheese in Brazil, under arrest. Gold bars being mentioned, all sorts of things. African officials there, Tokyo and Dentsu, the big advertising agency, caught up in a scandal around that. Maybe just the idea of global bidding for these worldwide events brings out the worst nature in people, and it's perhaps this is the way they've decided to pick the host and a preferred candidate, they call it, and it's theirs to lose, isn't it?
It does avoid those bidding corruption scandals for sure.
Might have almost brought the end to bidding for Olympics. We had Paris versus LA for the 2024 games, and they decided and said, let's just give Paris 24 and award LA 2028. And we are now in the home straight for Paris 2024, that spate of local stories that start to burst into life as issues. And what are the controversies this week? We've got, at least for visitors, not for locals, metro fares doubling during the games, and issue with roads as well.
Yeah, there's a transport issue and a cost issue. The tickets are also really expensive. The one thing that any kind of Olympic host, if you're living in the city, is that you have to suffer for years as they try and transform the city in order to host the Olympics. And Paris is the same. The entire city's been, feels like it's a building site. And then the transportation issues, and obviously when the event comes, you hope that you're going to be a part of it. And we can look back here and sitting in London, and it was quite a glorious summer. But these teething problems are there, and the issue this week was the Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo saying the transportation efforts aren't going to be ready in time. Paris won't be ready for the Olympics. But you wonder why she's saying that. There's she's of the left. There's Emmanuel Macron is a centrist politician. There are local politics. Martyn, when it comes down to it, the Olympics happen. Transport tends to work, and people focus on the games, don't they?
With London, there was a massive security problem just a few weeks beforehand. G4 basically couldn't get all the people they needed, and the army had to be brought in. And security, again, a big issue for Paris. There have been reports from analysts who think there's a sort of fairly high chance that there's going to be some sort of security incident there. And there's a sort of Big Brother style fears in that people who live in parts of Paris are going to have to register. They've got guests staying with them for security reasons.
And of course, the opening ceremony for the Olympics is going to be right through the centre, right down the Seine, which is going to be a security challenge.
I would still wait and see how they're going to secure this thing. So, for those not aware or aware of this plan, it is a flotilla of boats using the Seine to parade these athletes through the center, the heart of Paris. I mean, given the issues in the world right now, and even if there aren't, the level of security needed, the delegations from across the world, trying to secure that with all the rooftops they will pass and all the rest of it, just sounds like an absolute nightmare. Maybe it was good on paper in a room, but the idea of it in practice seems difficult. By the way, the other big issue is the cost of accommodation, the thousands of euros for apartments and Airbnb. The people are going to make out bandits at the locals, and it's still this issue of, is this the Olympics for everyone?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely going to be a challenge.
Yeah, the IFC board meeting there in Paris through this week. Well, as we wrap up this week, let's just run through a few other stories that have caught the eye. We mentioned the Bulgaria FA last week. We have now had the resignation of the FA president, Borislav Mihailov, after all those protests. In FIFA news, further blow to their agent reforms that they're trying to introduce.
Yeah, there was a case here in the UK brought by an agents group, and FIFA has lost that case. And this was FIFA's reforms on agents, the biggest element of which, or the most newsworthy, was this cap on how much they can charge in commissions, which was between 3 and 5%, and also the number of parties you can represent. It's a bit of a comprehensive loss in the UK. So those reforms aren't going through. FIFA trade. People would say, you know, the excess of agents needed to be tackled, and FIFA were probably trying to do the right thing, but it hasn't worked out, has it?
Yeah, big blow for FIFA on that, and I think no one's going to have much delight in the agents winning that one. Most people think they're taking money out of the game and just enriching themselves.
One place where there is money in the game from crypto. Has it been healthy? What about Cristiano Ronaldo? He's been promoting, is it called Binance? And what's happened to them?
Well, interesting few days for Binance, the world's biggest crypto platform. Last week, the United States government, Department of Justice, handed us enormous fine, over $4 billion in penalties and fines to Binance, also forcing out its chief executive, saying he cannot be involved with the company for 3 years. And this guy, Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, has been fined $50 million, after admitting money laundering violations. It's incredible that he's been fined. That company's been fined that much. No prison term at all. He gets a pretty much 3-year holiday. Very wealthy man. But now, Rob, Cristiano Ronaldo is facing a lawsuit, a $1 billion lawsuit for promoting the cryptocurrency exchange for like I said, $1 billion in relation to NFTs, these non-fungible tokens we've talked about in the past. Not great for the GOAT.
No, though we do often see lawsuits filed in the States that might not necessarily lead to anything, and he would deny any wrongdoing. Final story that caught my eye this week, something pretty notable to keep your eye on here in England, which is the future of women's football. The Super League and the Women's Championship have been run by the FA since they launched about a decade ago, but they've now been split off into a new co-venture. It's going to be heavily commercialised. Tariq, this is exactly what you want to see so often, splitting off competitions from governing bodies.
Yeah, well, I think maybe not in that sense. I just think that the fact that the women's football deserves dedicated people to run it, and whether, if this new body was to be solely concentrated on this women's league, women's football, that can only be positive. At the moment it's a loss leader for a lot of these clubs, so hopefully they will put the infrastructure down, be committed to it long term, and make it a viable project, rather something that often, when it makes money, focuses the mind, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Well, so many issues around this week. As ever, you can message us your feedback at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook, Instagram, or sportunlockpod@gmail.com. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.